So the idea of this project was just to take my scrappy old side table, I just use for coffee and beer, etc., and turn it into something that looks a little bit nicer. So I started by rubbing down the table to get all the old varnish or finish coat off. There was a lot of embedded drink stains and food stains over the years. Who knows how old this table is. I think it was given to us as a second or maybe even third hand piece of furniture with a nest of tables. So I started with an 80 grit paper, and here I'm working around the routed feature because that's where it got the most damaged and got the most ingrained dirt in it. So I just wanted to get that looking nice and neat and sharp again. So I planned to take the legs and the base off. And the base was held on by 8 screws, which I'm removing here. But it seemed that when the screws were out, it had also been glued and probably it had dowels in it as well. So it wasn't going anywhere. I don't know why the screws were in there particularly. Maybe it's just to give it a bit more strength as it's part of a nest of tables, so it'd be hanging from the top when it's put away. As I removed the legs, I used a sponge sanding pad to give them a good key up. They were quite clean really, just the odd bit of spilt drink on them here and there. One of them had a bit of paint on it, I think, which I'm removing here. So you don't need to go too far with these really, it's just to get anything that's going to make it through to the finish coat and stand out off really. Here I'm removing the rest of the legs with an Allen key. Now one of the problems that we've always had with these tables is the legs come loose, so when I put them back together I will put a bit of Loctite onto the threads of the Allen key bolts just to keep the whole thing tight and stop it from moving. And here you see it's broken down into its constituent parts. And here's a view looking down on it where I've taped it up with frog tape. Now because it's covered in old varnish or top coat, I'm using Zinsser bin here, or BIN, which is a great stain sealant. And it dries really quickly. You've got to use an old brush, or here I'm using a new cheap brush because it absolutely destroys brushes. You can't, it's very hard to clean off. So I just use a really cheap sort of 25p brush. And the idea is not to make it look lovely, it's just to stop it from having any lumps in it and just get it as smooth as you can really, because this is just stopping the old stain coming through into the top coats of paint that we're going to put on later. This stuff's expensive, so I haven't gone mad with it and covered bits that don't need covering, because it'd just be a waste of money. Here I'm doing the same process with the bin on the legs of the table. They're a little bit more tricky really because I'm not supporting them with anything, I'm just doing them in my hand. So what I did was do half of the leg, half of each leg, then let it dry, which doesn't take very long with this stuff. It's sort of touch dry in 10 minutes or so. And then I continued on. After all the legs are done, I just checked they were smooth enough before it completely dried, and then wrap the brush up in a plastic bag just to keep it as fresh as I can. Hopefully it'll last until tomorrow because I'm going to do the next table tomorrow. If you just seal it in, wrap it around as tight as you can. If you've got some handy tape, then just put the tape around it and it'll keep it safe and ready for the next day. So once that was dry, I went on to doing top coat. For this I used another leftover tin of paint I had from a recent job. So I assembled the table all back together first because just to make it easier really to get around the legs so they could dry in situ without me having to touch them. I put the Loctite onto the I hadn't put the Loctite onto the bolts at this point because I needed to take them back out and then put it all together securely at the end. I'm just putting them on loosely here so that they can dry. So it's loosely back together now. It's already given the effect I want. Oh, there's Gracie the dog there, just trying to find a spider or something. Okay, so now I'm just giving it a light rub down just to get rid of any sort of build up of the bin that would show through the top coat. There wasn't too much really, so it's just taking a bit of care so it looks nicer at the end. And then here I'm using a Dulux Trade Quick Dry Satinwood, which have been colour matched to Summer Linen, I think, which is slightly off-white colour, a little bit cream. Now it's best to use a synthetic brush that's slightly damp for doing this, because you get a better flow from the paint. Really the trick with this is to use a damp brush and get it on reasonably quickly, and just keep an eye out for runs, because it dries so fast. If you get a run, then it's very difficult to catch it before it dries. It's not like an oil paint where you go back quite a while after and catch the runs. And because I'm painting it upside down, any runs would look extra weird because they'd be running upwards on the final piece. But I think this is a great paint to work with personally. Never had any problems with it. 2 coats and it always looks fantastic. Yeah, so just taking my time, going around the legs, checking that I get each piece. Don't need to go mad on the first coat, just get it on and get it on as smooth as you can. If it's not covering 100%, that's fine. It's only a first coat, and then you get everything on the second coat. I could have done with tightening up the legs a little bit more here so they didn't wobble so much, but there you go. So here we are now, I'm just finishing off the first coat. And it's looking pretty good really, I would say. Quite pleased with it. The colour's nice, it's not quite a white. It sits really well with the wood. So with the brush, because it's a water-based satin wood, you can just wash it out with a bit of cold water and soap or washing up liquid, and your brush would be good to go straight away almost. So I've applied a second coat here, giving it a light sand where it needed it, not too much. And here I'm putting on my finish for the top, which is actually a door oil, an Osmo door oil, and yeah, it's made for doors, but it's what I had left over, so it's what's being used. And actually it goes on really nicely and it looks really good. As for how well it will last, I'm not sure. I might put a clear satin varnish over the top, but it's quite nice. It gives a nice finish as it is, so I might just leave it. You know, worst comes to worst, I'll sand it down again. And so here it is, the finished piece. Really happy with it. Click like, subscribe if you want to see some more. It's going to look so much better in my house than the old bit of tat.